Jayne Jones on the Iron Mindset podcast.
Yeah.
You're very welcome. So, Jayne, main reason I invited you here today, specifically, I reached out, I wanted to talk, and I knew we had to try and plan this around your schedule, because you're international now, you know. So we got you just after Irish PF Open Nationals 2023, and congratulations on an outstanding performance.
Thank you.
In the under 69 category. Jesus, what am I talking about? And finally breaking the 400 dots mark. So congratulations on that. How are you feeling post-comp?
Yeah, I went 9 for 9 for the first time at the weekend. And it honestly is such a feeling, because I walked away from the competition and I'm like, I can't find anything wrong that I did, or anything that I want to change, or anything that could take away from what I did. I think it's very hard sometimes when you've competed and you've put so much work into competing, not to be hypercritical on yourself after the fact. So that was really, really nice. I just felt really happy with the day, and it was so nice to be back over in Ireland. Yeah. I mean, you probably agree with me, like Irish powerlifting it's just something else.
It's amazing.
There's something special about it. I think it's that everybody cheers for each other. Everybody supports each other. It doesn't matter what club you're from, where you come from, who you're up against. Everybody cheers for each other. And there's something just really special and nice about that. So it's always a great experience to compete in Ireland. And Nationals in 2020 was the very first powerlifting competition I ever went to watch in person. And I was like, oh my God, this is incredible.
Yep.
And I think that's what got me hooked in, was seeing that in person.
That was a great day.
Yeah. So to get to, I mean, I competed at Nationals last year, but this year felt really special. I feel like I really soaked in the experience of it.
Yeah, I think you've it definitely seems like something clicked. It was a great performance. And I think it's always a great performance when you can say, you know what, I went 9 for 9, I had a great day, and I think there's actually more in the tank. And it gives you that bit of potential and something to work towards later on. And a great finish, as we mentioned, 400 dots. I'm sure there's a couple of people listening. If you're not sure, this is a score we use in powerlifting. It's relative to body weight in total, and 400 is agreed upon to be where you're at a fantastic standard. So congrats again. That's been phenomenal growth over the last couple of years you've been in the sport. You mentioned looking back at Nationals 2020 is the last competition we got just before COVID.
Yeah.
And some memorable moments that I remember is Barry Pigott dumping the bar over the top of his head. Go and Google that if you haven't seen it. It's bizarre. I've never seen a man dump a bar over his head and then start trying to help the spotters and loaders strip it down. And then it was Jack Kenny's 345 deadlift, which was the biggest in Ireland tested federations at the time. Was there any particular highlights that stood out to you as like a core memory unlocked? This is something I'm going to push and aspire for one day.
I think it was something about seeing someone come out for their last deadlift and everybody in the venue stood up for them. It was just incredible. And we had that at the weekend. At the time, I mean, I think that was Brona McPeak's last competition, I think, in Ireland. She squatted, I believe it was like 178 at the time, under 72, but she was like 67 kilos, deadlifting 201. There was just so much incredible lifting going down, and I just knew that was somewhere that I wanted to be. But yeah, at the time, I don't think there's any real standout moments, because if you look back at that Nationals, there was so much incredible lifting. I think Dav had a fantastic performance at that Nationals, and he was really involved with Trinity Barbell at the time, so that was really nice to see.
I think I've seen that there was a good support network there. David, one of the coaches down at Abs Powerlifting, I think he's had like a finger in so many people's training or first comps.
Yeah.
He handled me for my first 3. He helped me when I started, and I'm such a great guy. And I think it's lovely for people to see that, then the other side, seeing their coaches or mentors on the platform. I think that Nationals back in 2020 though was like that. It's that like snapshot in time, just as Irish powerlifting was really starting to like come together, and like the Irish PF, and it was some of the last big outings for the likes, as I mentioned, Barry Pigott, mentioned Brona McPeak. Last time we really got to see them at their absolute peak. But I think then it's a blessing in disguise, or a silver lining, because with COVID, that opened a lot of opportunities for the likes of myself, yourself, to start to take center stage. But just to bring it back, you mentioned Trinity Barbell, and that was your introduction into powerlifting. So
Yeah.
Trinity College has a powerlifting society or club and creates opportunities for young lifters to get into powerlifting. So what drew you into that initially?
It's so funny. In dietetics, your third year counts for like 60% of your degree. So when you do all your tough exams, all of that stuff. And then in final year, you have half of it is placement and half of it is your thesis. So you're kind of doing like a 9 to 5. And outside of that, you actually have free time. And I was a bit of an introvert in college. I'm an introverted person, but I was a bit of a recluse in college. I didn't really socialize. I'm not really into like going out. I'm a creature of habit and routine. And yeah, I was super into my studies. I was kind of, reclusive. And I found powerlifting online via Meg Squats. You probably know Meg Squats.
Yeah, I do know Meg. Yeah.
So I started going to the gym in 2018. I actually decided because I needed to gain weight. I was on the borderline of being underweight when I was about 18 or 19. And I really just didn't feel confident in myself. So I decided I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to start putting on some weight and feeling more confident in myself. And that was fine. But then I found the things that I enjoyed the most were like squatting and deadlifting. I hated bench pressing, surprisingly.
Irony.
And now it's like my favorite lift. So I was following all these like fitness influencers, Gymshark athletes, and I came across Meg Squats, and she was really involved in powerlifting at the time. I think she just competed in like Raw Nationals or whatever. And I was like, this is really cool. And so I started watching all her powerlifting videos on YouTube. And then I found like IPF Worlds. I didn't know that existed. And I started watching back all these old competitions. I was like, I think I want to try this. And I went into the gym and I remember trying to like arch on the bench press for the first time. And I benched 40 kilos. And I was like, this is great. Okay, I'm going to do this.
Your very first time benching?
No, I'd benched before that. But it was like, I think I could do like 30. So I added 10.
That's really good.
Yeah, I wish I could just go into the gym and add 10 kilos to my bench press now. But I decided I wanted to like commit to doing powerlifting training. And then I found out that Trinity had a society for it. So I reached out, and at the end of my third year, I reached out, and they were about to compete at their intervarsities. So I waited until next year to join.
Right.
And yeah, I just decided to get involved. I decided that I needed to have a hobby, and it was something that I was really interested in. And yeah, the rest is history.
It all just went up from there.
Yeah.
I think it really speaks to it though. You mentioned yourself like bit more of an introverted personality.
Yeah.
Like once you get talking though, you're fine. But I think like that, it's probably just putting yourselves in those scenarios. It's something that probably a lot of people listening can resonate with. You have to like proactively choose to place yourself in these. And I would have been quite the same. I wouldn't have been a big party or going out drinking or anything like that when I was younger too. And so bold decision to approach Trinity Barbell, get involved there. And I think that's something Raquel Reyes and I talked about on our podcast. It's the importance of community and kind of find your tribe or find your people.
Totally.
And I think that's a big, big part of it, especially with powerlifting. As you mentioned, like the atmosphere at Nationals 2020 all the way up now to Nationals 2023, it's unmatched anywhere. And I think that's a big thing about our little small community that we have is, and that's what I think people forget, is still quite small, still quite new, but it is supportive. Like we're all playing for Team Ireland. We ultimately are, despite all the funny banter and memes you see online on Instagram, we are ultimately all this tiny little island that represents massively well against the rest of Europe.
Yeah.
And I think that can't be overstated enough that is a phenomenal thing about here. So you got into Trinity Barbell. This is while you were doing your bachelor's degree, I assume?
Yeah, I was in my final year, so I was like 20, I want to say. Yeah, I joined the club, and as you said, like I found my group of people. That's where I met Arthur, who's my boyfriend. And
another great powerlifter as well.
Yeah, and we're still together. So that's where I met him. That's where I met so many good friends, and it just gave me such a sense of community that I hadn't experienced in a long time. I didn't really have a solid group of friends, I think, since I was maybe like 13 or 14 years old. And having a friend group and having them be interested in the same thing as you as well, I think it is massive because, as I said, I'm not a huge drinker. I don't like going out. And I think in powerlifting, if you're like, oh, I just want to have a chill night in, maybe eat my own food, watch television, people are like, yeah, that sounds great. Let's do that together. And they just understand your goals and your routine and everything like that. But it was a great social outlet for me, and it really, really brought me out of my shell. As I said, I'd been quite introverted, quite reclusive, and it brought me back out of my shell again. And yeah, it's just introduced me to so many incredible people. So I'd highly recommend it to anyone who's thinking of joining a club or just doing something different, trying something new. Just do it.
Yeah, that's what they say. Is like all the best things are just outside your comfort zone. Is the kind of tagline. It's cliched, but it's because it's true. It is so true. You mentioned as well. Had you played sports prior to powerlifting?
So I never really played sports at all growing up. I'm the youngest of 3 girls. So we weren't really a very sporty household. I think I did like a tiny bit of athletics when I was very young. I liked sprinting, which now I'm kind of like, obviously I'm predisposed towards like the muscle fibers that are good at like short bursts of activities. And then I moved primary schools when I was in 3rd or 4th class.
Right.
And I moved to this really tiny primary school in Tipperary. There was less than 100 people in the school. There was like 5 other people in my class. And everyone there was playing GAA. Yeah,
it's massive in Tipperary.
If I didn't play GAA, I was sat in the classroom while the rest of them were outside. Yeah. So I was like, right, I think I better do this. So I started playing with school, and then I started playing with my local camogie club. And like so many girls, I stopped about the age of 15 or 16. And it's so common for girls to fall out of sport at that age. And I did. So powerlifting was me coming back to sport for the first time in like 5 or 6 years. So I played camogie from about the age of 12 to 15. So for about 3 years.
It resonates with, to bring up my episode with Raquel again, it just resonates with something in that. So she spoke about this quite openly, that powerlifting for many people, for many adults, is their first sport. Yeah. Which I think is a big deal, because one of the best things about it is that even if you were completely, it sounds like you were pretty good if you're a field athlete, you're obviously somewhat athletic, but for a lot of people who otherwise wouldn't be athletic at all, powerlifting is a great sport because it doesn't really require a massive amount of athleticism.
No, yeah.
But the best thing about it is, as we've said, is it as an adult, as you mentioned yourself, you fall out of having a regular friend group when you get into those more latter years of your late teens, early 20s. It can be hard because you're focused on a lot of other things, education, a career.
Yeah, and you're changing a lot at that age.
Yes.
In terms of like what your interests are, what your personalities are. And sometimes you just kind of grow apart from people that you used to be friends with. So yeah, it was really crazy to me to start a new sport and just fall in love with it and make so many friends from it. Because I wouldn't have said, even though I did play camogie, I wasn't a particularly like sporty person. I'm not very coordinated. I have really bad like spatial awareness. Me and Arthur joke about this. He got me, do you know one of those VR headsets?
Yeah.
So I can try and improve my spatial awareness. But again, with camogie, I wasn't good at it, but I tried so hard. Me and my dad used to go outside and like practice extra. But it can be a bit harder with team sports, and especially with GAA, sometimes, there's local politics. It's a lot harder for your work to get directly reflected. And I think that's one of the things that I loved about powerlifting so much, was I put in the work, I get the results.
Yeah.
Simple. It's all on me, and the work that I do is directly proportional to the results that I get. And that just clicked with me because, I was very like studious in school, and it's the same thing. I study, I do the exam, I do well. And it kind of felt like the same thing. And that's what I really, really loved about it, because I'm not necessarily the most outwardly talented person at powerlifting or in sports in general, but I will work hard.
Yes.
And being able to reap the rewards of hard work means a lot to me.
I think you speak to something really important there as well. And I think it's something most people in sports like powerlifting can resonate with. When you're playing a team sport, it tends to be, and it's no knock on the coaches because they're trying to coach, potentially 24 people or however many are on the team. They have to adopt one approach and people can get left behind.
Yeah.
Because, you're trying to, 8 out of every 10 people might be the square peg that goes in the square hole, but every now and then you're going to get the circle peg, you're going to jam into that square hole. And it's this top-down approach. Everyone has to do this. Everyone needs to run this many laps or do this many drills or do work on this skill. Whereas the beauty of powerlifting training is the entire process can be shaped to the individual. And especially when you're working with good coaches like I've had the benefit of as well. You mentioned Davidas earlier. I know you worked closely with Ian Benson of Urban Barbell as well. And your current coaches, like when you're working with people who are willing to invest in you, that's what brings out the best in the athlete.
Yeah, definitely.
So looking here then, as I mentioned to you before we started, I had a little look back over your powerlifting history. So you seem to be cursed for your first comp for a very long time.
Yeah.
So what you were initially signed up to do, was it InterVarsities?
Yeah.
This was March 2020?
Yeah. So InterVarsities 2020 with Trinity Barbell. I think training for that comp is still some of the most fun that I've had. So the uni teams, DCU and Trinity used to train in abs on Monday and Wednesday. So not the days that everybody else is there.
Yeah.
We used to have this crew come in. Dav would be there. Jay would usually be there as well, like looking over people. And it was just so much fun. And I had no concept of how good or how bad I was. And you'll never get that again. You'll never be prepping for your first competition again and just soaking it up. And I had so much fun prepping for that comp. And it was cancelled about 2 days out.
Yeah, I remember, yeah.
Yeah, so it was just at the start of as March 2020, everything was hitting with COVID. So the schools closed on the Thursday, and they discouraged people from meeting in large groups. So they made the decision to cancel the competition. And obviously I was extremely disappointed at the time, because I'd put in so much hard work to get there, and I felt like I was on to have fun and start off my powerlifting career. It didn't happen. We still had a mock meet at the time, which was fun, but it didn't count towards anything. And then that just continued to happen for the space of about a year and a half. Supposed to do junior nationals the end of 2020, cancelled, same thing again. I was supposed to do a comp at the start of 2021. I did get my first comp I did get in August in 2020. So that was like in between lockdowns. We kind of came into the summertime, restrictions lifted, and then we went back again in the winter. But it definitely felt delayed getting to my first competition. Yeah.
Well, that's it. Like, I think it's I actually had a very, very similar idea. I cannot remember the name of the competition. I was signed up for an IPF in March 2020 as well. It was in City Gym in Limerick.
Yeah.
Can't remember what it was meant to be called. Some new concept they had, but that went. And then Ab Series in April was due to still go ahead, and then that got cancelled. And then I actually competed at that same one you mentioned from August 2020, Ab Series 4.
Yeah.
I had a great meet. I know you were, like most of us, hard at work training at the back garden, the best sun Ireland has seen in years.
Oh my God. Yeah. It was incredible. I was very lucky to get a barbell and some plates from a group personal training studio that my parents used to train at.
Yeah.
So they lended me out bars and plates. My dad made me a rack out of planks of wood. So I saw this idea on Instagram, and he pretty much just stacked up the planks of wood. So I'd have a bench rack height and I'd have a squat rack height, and we just put those out the side of the house, and I just trained away.
Good man, Dad.
Yeah.
Ingenuity. In times of crisis, he can make a bench.
Exactly.
What's up. But so since then, though, you've gone on to win after win. I've got it the notes here in front of me of all your totals. You basically, in your first ever meet, I'm right in saying you put up 275 total.
Yeah.
And then if we jump even I think it's just under 2 years, you put nearly 100 kilos in that total. Am I right to say that? That would have been at the, let me look here, Open Nationals last year,
Yeah.
365.
Yeah.
So in that period of time, a lot of training went in. A lot of, as you mentioned, if you give you something to work on that you can take control of yourself, you'll put the work in, and that speaks for itself. Like that's 90 kilos on the total, and that's for people that maybe don't understand, or maybe if I know you might have some Americans listen, they don't know the kilo conversion. It's 2.2. Multiply that in pounds and you'll figure that out. But the point is, that's a monstrous amount of kilos to add. And something we talked about before the podcast is there tends to be this emphasis in powerlifting on the people that are essentially like naturals. And we do have people that come into the sport that are just immediately phenomenal at it, whether it's leverages, genetics, doesn't matter. I mean, the circumstances are set up in such a way that, yes, they work hard. Yes, they absolutely blast every training session. They're dedicated, nutrition, recovery, all that. But people just do have proclivities to be naturals at it. But you are showing that, I wouldn't say you weren't a natural, but you started as, if I'm not wrong in saying you're just under 60 kilos when you started, you're quite light, and you've dedicated yourself over the course of those 2 to 3 years to gain muscle, gain strength, and become a student of the game, essentially. And it's paid dividends, as we mentioned at the start. You got your 400 dots at the most recent comp. So it is a great story of how hard work pays off. But even in that, if we look over the course of your competitions, a good number of them are abroad, international, wearing the Irish singlet, which is a phenomenal opportunity in and of itself. So I definitely want to know a bit more about that. Like, what was it? What was the first international meet you did? Worlds in 2021? Am I right in saying that?
Yeah. So going back to when I started powerlifting, as I mentioned, Trinity Barbell, Dav was the coach at the time, and we were training in abs. And I started in September 2019, and I remember watching EPF Europeans that year because Dav was going, and there was a few other people, just names that I knew from around the gym were going. And I remember watching it, and I was like, I want to do that. Mm-hmm. I want that to be me. And that was really all I thought about for every training session until 2021. And when I did the COVID Cup, I think I totaled 272. Mm-hmm. So that was in March 2020. And then August, I did 275. I ended up running into a back injury like very early on in my powerlifting training. I haven't struggled with it since at all, thank God. But I didn't really add anything to my total. And I remember doing that comp in August, and to be honest with you, I was so gutted with it. I was so disappointed in myself because I thought I would be so much further on by then. And I remember in December of that year, I met Ian Benson and I asked him to be my coach. And I said to him, I really want to total 315 kilos. And then by July, I got an invite to trial for the Irish team. So I'd been back up in Dublin. I'd been training around. I think people could see that I had made progress. And obviously, 2021 was a bit different for qualifying for the Irish team because we didn't have competitions leading up to it. So they decided a couple of people who would have been previously good juniors or good open got their invites. But then they decided to do like a trial day, which was essentially just a competition. It was a mock meet for other lifters who they thought had the potential to make the team. And I did that trial day and I totaled about 345 at it. And the qualifying total was like 350. So I got my invite to go. I went to Sweden in September and I totaled 352. And yeah, that was just the best thing ever. I am obsessed with powerlifting. People who are close to me know it. Like I eat, sleep, breathe it. If there's a competition on somewhere in America at the weekend and I follow a lifter on Instagram, I'm watching it. I love this sport. So to be around all the top lifters and see them in person, it was just crazy. And I was quite emotional at it because I achieved a goal that I set for myself. This is so silly, I'm emotional talking about it, but it meant so much to me to do that.
Well, let me just say as well, I've had Jake Brennan on a couple of times, and Jake is, for better or worse, Jake is a contentious figure. However, he says the only real regret he has from powerlifting is not doing it as a natural, because he wanted to wear that singlet.
Yeah.
So you have achieved that honor, and I'd say you're the envy of every other powerlifter that hasn't gotten to that level, because that is the pinnacle of what we can do in the Irish PF. So you should, if you're getting emotional about it, I completely understand. That is a level I aspire to be at one day as well. Like I've only done a handful of IPF meets, but that's the motivation behind it. I'd love to be at that level. So if you're emotional about it, I totally understand. So and congratulations. That's a phenomenal level to reach in the couple of years you've been in it, and it is a testament to your work ethic.
Thank you.
No problem at all. Like, I mean, it is. Because I said the same to Kim. You might remember last year, I put out a message asking people for pictures of them competing, because I was making when I worked in FlyFit, I presented a powerlifting workshop, and I actually used yourself and Kim in your IPF singlets as a testament to that. Well, powerlifting has this stigma of like everyone being just big fat dudes. Alex Kremens recently said it on his visit. He was on the Odyssey podcast, and he said, "I thought powerlifting was just a sport for fat people." And then he realized he could do it at 60 kilos or when he was quite a bit lighter. But I used you guys as the idea that, like, you don't have to become this, super morbidly obese person to represent your country internationally, because you both have achieved that. And then incidentally, I used Mark Stell and Keane as the male equivalent. So that's the regard many of us hold you in. So again, congratulations to you on that achievement, and it's phenomenal. And the fact that you were doing all this, and then you, as we mentioned earlier on, you achieved your bachelor's degree and have now used that to create opportunities for yourself all throughout the world of powerlifting. And that's something I definitely want to discuss. So you were in Worlds, the Classic Worlds, you totaled your 352.5, phenomenal achievement. But then you also did EPF the same year.
Yeah.
So you got quite a bit of international experience going abroad, traveling. Firstly, you did all this in 2021. How was it?
Intense. I actually did junior nationals in the middle of the two of them well.
That was a question I had, because on Open Powerlifting, two of them are in as the same date.
Yeah, so they're not the same date. So Worlds was like the 30th of September.
Right.
And then Junior Nationals was like the 20th of October or like the 16th of October.
So a lot of very high profile competitions very close together.
Yeah. And then EPF Euros was the very start of December.
Right.
So I wanted to do all of them. It was my last year as a junior. I did not know how long or whether I would get in an Irish singlet again. I did Worlds. I was like, absolutely, I will do Europeans if I've the chance to do it. And absolutely, I want to do Junior Nationals. I won that competition, and that meant a lot to me as well. I think that's one of my favorite competitions that I did. Pretty much Abs had entered up until I was like the last session, and every weight class that we had entered a lifter into, they had won. And the only two lifters left for the weekend were me and Listis. So the pressure was on, because obviously Listis was going to win her weight class. There wasn't any question there. And I felt like I proved to myself that weekend that I can be competitive. It was really special to me to win that. And then I went on to do Euros. I didn't have, at the time, I was really disappointed with that performance. I missed 2 deadlifts. But apart from that, I PB'd my bench, I PB'd my squat, and I remember afterwards feeling disappointed with it. And Jay and Louis were like to me, "Jayne, look at where you were a year ago. Do you think if you told you a year ago that you would be disappointed and feeling this way now, that you'd believe it?" So perspective is a very, very important thing. But it was an intense period, but I wouldn't change it for the world. So happy I did it, because you don't get those opportunities presented to you every day, especially when you're someone, as I said, that I had to work really hard to get to those positions. And talented people can just show up, and people who are better than you and stronger than you, and they can beat you. So I was going to take every opportunity I could to have those sort of experiences. And
you really made the most of you. As you mentioned, you were about to transition from junior into the open.
Yeah.
And I think that was one of the like, I don't really like bringing up coronavirus and the lockdowns to people in the podcast, because like I think everyone, like, as much as I think most people did make the most of it, it was still pretty shit.
Yeah.
Particularly in powerlifting, because a lot of juniors were robbed of their last couple of years
Yeah.
in the sport in that category, as well as a few lost Debses and things like that, graduations.
Yeah.
So, that is definitely a testament to how much you made of that opportunity. Doing this, as I mentioned, while doing your bachelor's, while we were dealing with the travel restrictions and jumping through all these hoops to try and even get abroad and all these extra considerations at the competitions. So to have made that level during that period of time is phenomenal. It does speak to your work ethic. And you're right in saying that, because even mentioning Listis is somebody who's been mentioned on this podcast a good few times because she's such an icon in Irish powerlifting.
Yeah.
And I don't use that term lightly.
No, you're right.
She is, I think, for visibility of the sport, her approach to it, she's absolutely iconic, phenomenal character. Somebody I'm going to try and get on the podcast at some stage, but whenever she's in the country for more than 2 days.
Yeah.
But I think she is that example of somebody. She does work incredibly hard.
Yes.
She does all the right things, but she is just a natural talent.
Absolutely. Yeah.
She even on her worst day, she's going to outlive most people in her weight class. She's just that good.
Yeah.
And I think it's phenomenal to hear that you're somebody who probably doesn't identify as somebody who just walks in and sweeps a weight class.
No.
You're somebody at the grind for every kilo on that bar. And just to bring it back, you mentioned you had contended with a bit of a back injury. Had that resolved itself by the time we got abroad?
Yeah, by the start of 2021, I was pretty good with it again. Yeah.
Good, yeah. Because that's one of the, I contended with one a little bit last year, and it was the help of Tristan Jacobs who got me back on my feet, just recontextualized a couple of things, really, really helped. But those are the things that can really hamper performance. And it's one of those things we don't tend to talk about as much on the likes of Instagram. We don't seem to see athletes in the sport, particularly that we're in, because we're just moving through the same ranges of motion on repeat. It tends to be those little overuse injuries that accrue over time that you might see these small dips in performance or not get totals you want or expect. But it's great that you've overcome that. And as we see, you've smashed some competitions all throughout the years. You've got this nice upward trajectory on total, resulting in, like we said, for the Open Nationals, your 400 dots. But one thing I did want to just while we're still talking about competitions, we'll get into some more things. But the White Light Media Championships, I want to know about that because I remember when they were advertising for it. Was this the first one they did one last year as well?
They were supposed to do one in 2020.
That's right. Yeah.
And again, COVID. So they didn't get to do it. But they were supposed to do one back then. So this was actually the first time that I got to go ahead.
Because I was eyeballing the shit out of I really want to do that. I really want to do. But it was just so close to nationals. I was maybe I shouldn't. So bold choice. 6 weeks. 6 weeks in the difference?
Yeah. So the way that it happened was I saw that comp advertised and I was like, I want to do that. I'd done ab series in August, and while I did put kilos on my toll, it wasn't the best performance. It didn't really fully reflect what I had done in training, and I was hungry to show what I had done. So I decided to sign up for that, and I wasn't actually sure whether I was going to do nationals this year or not. In August, I decided that I didn't want to do last chance to try to qualify for it, because of the year that I had had before. And I felt like I was putting pressure on myself to be back at the level that I was before way too quickly. And I was like, if I miss nationals next year, it won't be the end of the world. It's not going to be my last nationals. I can get back there again. So I decided to let the qualification process decide for me whether I did it or not. So I ended up qualifying with the toll that I had done at 2022 nationals.
Brilliant.
So I was like, obviously I'm going to do it now. But I signed up for White Lights not knowing yet whether I was going to do it. But I had 6 weeks. It wasn't the worst. It was a lot better than 2021. So
yeah. No, it's the year's off we're only just coming into March now, and you've already smashed out 2 really, really good comps, which is great to see. And all throughout this, you moved up a weight class. So there's a whole lot that goes. I think when we talk about these things, it's somewhat of a disconnect. People, you just decided to move up to a different weight class. Yes, but there's everything that goes into that with who you see in the mirror, your body image, your wardrobe, your clothes. Yeah. All these are considerations I don't think people think about.
No.
And I think it's great that you made the proactive choice to do it. But there's definitely going to be swings and roundabouts with that. Did you have to contend with this yourself, or it was because you actively made the choice to do it? Do you think that kind of curbs some of it?
I think I did decide to do it myself. I didn't struggle to cut to be a 63 kilo lifter. I was very comfortable at that because, as I mentioned to you previously, back in 2018, I weighed about 51 or 52 kilos
Right.
at this height. So I'd already gained quite a significant amount of weight over time, and I was quite comfortable there, but it just didn't feel like the right weight class for me. For some reason, it just didn't feel like the right fit. I looked up to people who were 69 lifters on the international stage, both junior and open. And I remember my favorite weight class when I started was the 72 weight class, which sadly doesn't exist anymore. And I think it would actually have been the perfect weight class for me. But anyway, I saw myself, I was like, they're the lifters that you love watching the most. And it just felt like the right move for me. But I'm not going to lie and say that there wasn't blips along the way. Your body changes. Your clothes, as you said, gym clothes aren't cheap, like leggings, sports bras, all that stuff. And seeing your body change can be tough. But I fell in love with powerlifting because of how it made me feel, not how it made me look. That kind of came as an after fact. So yeah, I've had blips along the way. I thought about, will I just go back to 63? Will I just cut back down again and have more muscle now? But I think this weekend really 100% solidified for me that this is the right weight class for me, and I'm happy here, and I feel strong here. But yeah, it's tough, and it has its highs and its lows. You come into the gym someday and your training's going amazing. You're like, oh my God, going up the weight class is the best decision ever. And then some days you have crap training days and you're like, why did I do that? I've put on more weight and I'm not moving weight better. So it is tough, but I think because I made the proactive choice to do it rather than being kind of forced to do it by a bad experience with weight cutting, that it's certainly been a bit easier for me.
Well, I know Kim mentioned on her podcast, I think the great thing is you've decided to do it and you're doing it like over a period of time. You're letting the process happen itself and growing into the weight class.
Yeah.
Whereas Kim mentioned when she made the decision to move up, she literally just ate like shit for 6 weeks and was like, what the fuck am I doing? And she started working with Katrina Connolly then. So it's like sometimes I think that's something that affects us all. Like you get caught up in the emotions of the moment and it can have a spiral effect. Whereas if we were all just robots and you just input the data, it would be much easier.
Yeah.
But unfortunately we're not. But that raises a really good point. And naturally as a female competitor in the sport, do you think that would be something a lot of the girls might suffer where they could potentially grow if they went up a weight class, but just that like fear because they're identifying so much as a 47 or 52 or 57?
I think you'll probably agree with me that it's shifting away from that.
Yeah, and for the better. Yeah.
For the better. In female sport in general, if you look across all sports, things like running, things like gymnastics, there's unfortunately this really bad mindset that you need to be lighter to be better. I don't think that translates to powerlifting. We're lucky in a way that people understand that if you're heavier, mass moves mass. But it kind of proliferates female sport in general. And unfortunately, female sport, we're still held to a standard of how we look way more than males are, no matter what sport you do. And that plays into things. But I do think it's shifting in the right direction for people, understanding that you don't have to hold yourself to a certain weight class and make that your identity. As I said to you, people can get overly focused on being a good 63 kilo lifter when they should just focus on being a good power lifter. And whatever it takes to get there, it should be what you're willing to do. But we're moving away from that now. I think especially for, junior and sub-junior lifters, unless you're, representing your country, or fighting for medals, you shouldn't be cutting weight. And that's my opinion in general, to be honest with you, is that cutting weight, you should only do it if it increases your competitiveness. And nationals last year, I remember looking, as you said, I did 365 at 63. if I had competed in 69s that year, I would have placed the exact same.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, why am I cutting?
Yeah.
It's not actually giving me any benefit. It hasn't increased my competitiveness. And I feel, I've spoken about this before, that weight cutting has become nearly like this rite of passage in powerlifting,
Mm-hmm.
that people feel like if they're not doing a weight cut, they're not like competing properly, or you should be doing a weight cut no matter where you are. You should just focus on doing what's the best decision for you at the time,
Mm-hmm.
especially if cutting starts to damage your physical health and your mental health and leave you with a bad taste in your mouth about powerlifting.
Mm. I think I couldn't have said that better myself. I think that is one of those things. It's almost like I have to suffer first. I can't commit. Like it's, you're taking the one day you want to be your absolute strongest and doing everything you can to fuck it up beforehand.
Yeah.
Like I worked with Shane Story up to IPF Last Chance in December and now internationals as well. And I will say I was still able to eat egg bagels in the morning. I could have pancakes for lunch because he just had such a good handle on, like, I wouldn't be like a very emotional person when it comes to these things, but just having to somebody to say, you know what, I'm going to free up the mental bandwidth. You're going to do all this for me. And he was an absolute pro throughout. And I know having those people in your corners can help. And as you mentioned, I think some of it about female sport, particularly in like certain weight classes or even looking a certain way still, some of it is just, it still permeates the culture. As you said, we're managing to dissipate that now as we see athletes like yourself, like other, I'm going to have Katrina Connolly on at some stage as well.
Yeah.
She's another girl who's chronicled her journey from being a bit lighter to gaining a bit of weight, and she's gotten stronger. She feels good, looks good. And I think that's the important thing. It's like, how your relationship is with yourself is massively important and all that. But I think another thing is sometimes coaches can get too caught up in, I need you here for this medal or for this podium or for this finish or for these dots. And it's like, yeah, but like, what are you doing to the person for that? Because
100%.
I think there's ways to cut weight that are fine, you know? Like I'm very happy with how it went for me, but like you're dead right. There's so many people that are essentially kind of shooting themselves in the foot in a performance-based sport to do all the things that are counterintuitive to performance. And this is why I like having the podcast. We can highlight these things and how they're not necessarily always the best idea, particularly in competitions like the Irish PF and the International Powerlifting Federation. We've got 2-hour weigh-ins. Yeah. There's as the sport grows, there's scope for people to see that you don't have to identify as one weight. Yeah. And just make that your entire existence. Like if you could, like you're in striking range now of a 400 kilo total, and I would wonder, I would say you probably could do it at a lighter body weight, but who knows what would have had to go into it or how many years. Whereas now, like that's definitely tenable within the next 9 months, which is phenomenal. That's a phenomenal standard to be at, like especially in sleeves and tested federations, phenomenal. So with that then in mind, as somebody who works in this field, you work with athletes, you're that person for so many athletes that helps them with the nutrition. Is there like, do you see a difference in how it affects male and female, or would it just be universally, do athletes feel the pressure to be a certain weight for certain competitions? Would you say that it's maybe a thing in the sport of powerlifting where we're sacrificing kilos on the bar for kilos on the scales almost?
100%. And I think you see it in both males and females. I always say the risk should be worth the reward. You know, as you said, weight cutting, some methods of weight cutting are more riskier than others. And when I say that, I say physical health and mental health, because restrictive diets do put you at a higher risk of developing disordered eating. And we're in a weight class sport. We all talk. It's so funny in powerlifting. You walk into the gym, people are like, "Oh, what are you weighing?" And you're like, "Oh, I'm this." That's just not a normal conversation outside of the gym. I do think it exists in both. I think dots points is a great thing, and it's a great thing to have as a marker. But I see so many people get way too caught up in what their dots are and trying to make their body weight light to hit a certain dots points, or not have a good prep, so decide to cut more weight so that their dots points are better, and they're just shooting themselves in the foot. People in both male and female identify with weight classes and feel they have to be at a certain weight class and don't listen to the signs around them that maybe that's not the best decision for them. And maybe it's just not the best decision for this one competition.
Right.
Your weight is just not a permanent thing. And I think it's viewed so much in that way. Or the decision to go up a weight class is a permanent thing. It's just not. Your weight can go in malleable in either direction. You can gain weight, you can lose weight, and it's just not permanent. And you can decide in that moment that, okay, I think doing it this comp is the best decision for me. And it doesn't have to be this big, massive, life-changing decision that you've decided to be this weight class now and you're no longer this weight class. It's just the right choice for you now. And I think, coaches are getting a lot smarter with that as well. And I'm really happy to see the growth of nutrition coaching in powerlifting. In Ireland, people like Shane, people like Katrina doing it, I'm doing it. There's, lots of people doing it, and getting in people who know what they're doing about nutrition to help athletes. It's the best decision that you can make for the athlete as a coach, because you're coaching them, and maybe you do know about nutrition, maybe you do know about weight cuts, but you're thinking about so many other things as well. And having someone else come in who's objective, takes emotions out of the situation, can help your lifter so much. And I think if you're a lifter who wants to try do a weight cut, just get someone to help you.
Yeah, just hire a coach.
Just hire a coach. When we're so unobjective about everything that affects ourselves. We're so, you see your weight a kilo up the day before the competition, and if it's you, it's so hard not to get as stressed or emotional about it. Versus your coach will see that and be like, that's fine. That's exactly where you need to be, and guide you in the right direction. You're
basically singing from the same hymn sheet that I always sing to my own athletes, particularly people I coach through abs. Like, I would say to them, your scale weight is like a snapshot in time. It doesn't, that's going to change 5 minutes after you step off the scale, start drinking water. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, there's so much more. Like, you mentioned towards the beginning. Yeah, fair enough. If you're somebody who's in contention for medals and it's really, really important for this one comp, there are things that can be done. But I think working with a professional like yourself is what is usually the missing piece for people, because they generally go to these extremes. And it's funny how quickly people's minds jump. Like, before every competition, if I've guys lifting or girls lifting, I'll do like a little Zoom call about a week out.
Yeah.
And I'll just talk to them through, make sure, you've got these things on the day, like, especially if it's in abs, bring fucking toilet paper, you know what I mean? Things like that. But I was talking to a couple of them that I've got one or two lads who've done a good few competitions now, and they like to do water loads and cut into it, right? So that's fine. One of the girls, it was her first comp, and she was overhearing this part of the conversation, but I said to Pete, I said, don't worry about this. It's nothing to do with you. It's just for these two.
Yeah.
This is like not something you guys need to worry about. But she like rang me after. It was like she's type 1 diabetic. She's like, do I like just do with like orange juice, or do I just drink water? Because I don't know if I can not have sugar. And I was like, you don't need to do anything. Yeah. But it's how quickly people see or hear what other lifters do, and immediately think that's what I need to do. That's what I need to be doing. And it is the objectiveness of somebody like that, like a professional like yourself, who knows how to navigate these things and help people manage their emotions around their weight or their food or their calories or their performance on the day, I think is vital.
Yeah, and I think what you touched on there is like the overhearing of information. We're so lucky in one way that like so much information exists about powerlifting online now. I know like Arthur has said, like when he started powerlifting, there was barely anything online about weight cutting, peaking, attempt selection, all this information that is just generally more available now. And that can be a really good thing, but it can also be a dangerous thing if the wrong information is shared, or not even the wrong information for a certain person. Yeah. And that ties kind of back into that rite of passage thing. People thinking, well, they're doing a weight cut, I should be doing one. Is that what's done? And feeling like you need to do it to be a powerlifter and be part of that experience. And
there's a certain amount of that. Like, it's like I've seen it now with some of the group that I coach out of abs. They'll see what some of the more advanced lifters are doing. Or the lifters that are in the sport a long time, and they're like, that's how they warm up. That must be what I have to do. Or they set up their deadlift this way. Maybe that's like the secret to adding 10 extra kilos, Yeah. And I get it. I get the idea, but it's just generally not how human beings work.
No.
But if I was to ask you then, like you mentioned during the conversation, there would be signs for people that like, okay, maybe the weight cut's not the right idea for you. And then just given your level of experience working with athletes, are there any like particular signs or red flags you would usually identify? People say, okay, maybe doing a weight cut's not the right thing for you. Is it something they're saying? Is it something that's happening in their training? Something they're doing? What might it be?
I think there's a lot of things that come into play here. So my problem is that sometimes people start thinking about their weight cut like what they're going to weigh 3 weeks out from their competition. You need to think about it a long time in advance of that, because ideally if you're doing weight manipulation, you don't want to be doing that for a large amount of your weight. So let's just say, you know, you compete in 93s, you can probably cut from 95 or 96, but you know, 97, 98, 99, that cutting from that high amount of weight is going to damage your performance. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't do a 93. It just means that you might need a bit more time to prepare for it, diet down, do your weight manipulation. So how much weight that you have to lose and how much time that you have to do it in is a really big thing. Generally, we say don't cut more than 5% of your body weight if you're doing a 2-hour weigh-in. So that's really simple calculation to do. Just get your weight class and multiply it by 1.05. And you shouldn't really be doing your like acute weight cutting measures from anything more than that. I think on top of that, if you have any sort of poor relationship with food, any sort of disordered eating, dieting brings those things up for you, it's probably not the best idea. And you should really be working on having a good relationship with food and making sure you're well fueled instead of bringing all this on top of it, because it's probably going to end up putting you in a worse off place. And then I think the other kind of red flag not to do a weight cut is if like you've done weight cuts before and it's just not working for you anymore in terms of your transfer of your performance from the platform or from training to the platform. And what I mean in that situation is you've ticked those other 2 boxes. Your relationship with food is good. You diet down to a good range above your weight class. You don't cut more than 5%, but you're still not seeing it transfer over. Sometimes this happens with people, you know, who are very lean. They don't have that room to cut as much weight. That's probably a sign that, you know, you should go up a weight class. But as I said, there's so many things playing into it. It's not clear cut. It's all about what's your starting point and all those factors. But I would say they're probably kind of 3 things to be like probably not for you.
No, there's good value in there. Like, and you're right in that it's nuanced because each person is going to present differently at different stages in the prep. Like that was, you pretty much nailed down exactly what I did. I recognized early on when I decided I was going to compete at IPF last December in 2022. I started working with Shane in early September. And at the time I was still within a striking range. I think I was just over 96 kilos. And we slowly brought me down to about 95, 94.5 till about 3 or 4 weeks out. And then he changed a couple of things around. And consistently I've weighed in a kilo or more under the weight class. Like Nationals just gone, I was 91.9. So there was even scope there. And as I said, the days leading up to it, I was eating egg bagels, pancakes. I was having steak and potatoes and veg. I was having full meals. But I was like, he's a magician. You know what I mean? But that's the thing. It's working with somebody who knows how to manage your expectations, your highs and lows, depending on who you are as an athlete. I really think it can't be overstated to the value of that. Like, as we've mentioned, you've put in a whole lot of time into your education. You're seemingly every time I look at your Instagram, you're upskilling. You're learning something new. You completed your internship program with the strength guys, who you're working with now as a nutrition coach, which is a phenomenal opportunity. And that's obviously exposed you to a much wider array of athletes that you've worked with. Some pretty top level lifters, if I'm not mistaken. Am I right?
Yeah. So I had Kafui, who just competed at the Canadian National Championship. I've worked with, you know, Annie Nelson, got a medal at Europeans just gone this last December.
Well done, Annie Nelson.
Yeah. Alice Freeman got a medal at Junior Europeans in 2021. It's incredible to get to work with these levels of athletes and be able to make an impact and a difference in their training, because when you are at that top level and you are, as we said, one of these people that is naturally gifted, you do still work hard, but you're looking for that extra 0.05%, because sometimes that's the difference between first and second place, or even just 10th and 5th place, getting better. So getting to work with those athletes it's incredible for me to feel like I've been able to help them along their journey. And I think that's something that I love the most about coaching is that connection. As I said, I love powerlifting, and it's so nice for me to be interlinked in someone else's journey in some other sort of way. But tying back to the learning point, continuous education and learning is so important to me. I did my bachelor's, I finished that in 2020 in nutrition and dietetics. And since then, I recently just completed a diploma in performance nutrition as well with the IOPN, because I did dietetics and I did nutrition, but I really wanted to hone in on the sports side of it and make sure I covered all bases there. And then I had the opportunity to do the internship with the strength guys. And that was more so focused on powerlifting coaching than nutrition coaching. And I was really, really happy I got the opportunity to do that, because I knew that coaching and powerlifting was something that I wanted to do down the line. But there's no real clear path to it. And I feel like that internship equipped me so well, because I wanted to make sure when I committed to doing it that I had, as I said, equipped myself with the best knowledge and the best experience leading up to it that I could. I'm very much so a person that feels like I need to have covered all bases on something. And I do think that comes from like a background of, healthcare and science and understanding, like the Dunning-Kruger effect. The more you know, the less you think you know.
100%, yeah.
So I'm really grateful that I got to do that. And now, as a result, as I said, I'm working with a nutrition coach with the strength guys. And I'm really grateful for that.
And then I just want, another aspect of this is, because it's something we talked about before we switched on the microphones, I think. We were talking about participation in the sport outside of the scope of just what you do on the platform. And that, people don't necessarily need to worry about the weight class they're in or the weights they're lifting. There's we mentioned Jordan Voss, Cormac Dagg, the people like that contribute to the sport in really tangible, memorable ways that make it integral to what we're able to do. That doesn't necessarily just have to be them as athletes, even though they both those guys are. Same as yourself. You are now, a cornerstone or key player in many of these international athletes and their ability to demonstrate their best day on the platform. But then the other piece of that is then, I want to know, how did you end up working with Eleiko?
This is pretty crazy. It's not pretty crazy. I just saw the job advertised and I went for it.
Yeah, that's amazing.
In 2021, the World Championships was hosted at the headquarters, Eleiko's headquarters in Halmstad, Sweden. And we got to go there, and I think seeing that really showed to me that they weren't just a company that was selling things, because they gave up their entire headquarters for Masters, Juniors, Sub-Juniors Open. It was a ridiculous amount of athletes just taking over their space, and you know how powerlifters are. We're loud, dropping heavy weights, cheering, and they were so happy to have it there. And I was like, wow, they really actually care about the sport and the supporting the sport. And Arthur got a job offer for the UK at the end of 2021. So we decided we were going to move. And I decided that I wanted to take a break from working in clinical dietetics. And I really didn't know what route I was going to go down. I was like, maybe I'll just focus on online coaching, I'll get more into sports nutrition. I knew I wanted to work in some capacity with sports. And I saw a job advertised for Eleiko on their Instagram. And it was for the Midlands in the UK, which is where we were moving to. And I clicked on the job description and it said it was looking for people who were passionate about strength training and the impact it could have on people's lives. And I remember being like to Arthur, like, should I go for this? And I'm so grateful to have him in my life because he's pushed me for so many things that I wouldn't have done. And he always says, I think it's a quote from someone else, but he always goes to me, you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take.
He's right.
What have you got to lose by going for it? And I went for it and I got an interview. And I remember doing my interviews and I'd wanted the job, and then I did my interviews and I was like, I really want the job. And I ended up getting the job, and now I'm working for them in the UK and Ireland, and incredible team of people in the UK, incredible company globally, and a massive change for me. I mean, I was working as a clinical dietitian and now I work in sales, which was kind of terrifying to make essentially a career change. And I was scared as to how other people would pick it up. You know, my family, my relatives, what would they think? Because I think my family are very, proud of what I've achieved with dietetics, and getting that in my leaving cert. There was only one course in the country and I committed so much time to it, and they were worried I was, throwing it away and a career change. But I haven't been happier in a job since like this job. And I've been working since 2020. So I've been working 3 years now since I'm out of college, and I absolutely love it. But it was really scary to take the jump and to do it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, moving to another country is one thing. I know, as you mentioned, Arthur got the opportunity. You're both going for it. And, as much as you're saying, like, I've trained with Arthur. Arthur's a great guy. Great, very encouraging when he's on the platform, when he's spotting you. Great fella to have, So I'm glad he didn't die that one time. That bloody bar was dropped on him. But it sounds like you both support each other quite well, which I'll always love to hear. I've had Ben on a couple of times, and Ben speaks very highly of a support network he has with Bonnie, his missus. So I always love to hear that. And I think that speaks volumes to the importance of who you surround yourself with and the people you have in your life, because they make such a big difference. And naturally, he encourages you into this opportunity, which has paid massive dividends. Now, my next question then is obviously an amazing opportunity working with Eleiko. You get into the opportunities that present to you, places to go, people to meet, the networking opportunities, the best equipment in the world, let's be honest. And a story I know that Jay Farrant, the head coach for Ireland, current president of the IPF, for better or for worse, and the head coach of ABS, has mentioned that when he was starting back, when the Irish PF was starting back in Ireland, it was actually Eleiko that helped them out at the beginning, whereas other companies essentially ignored them. So I think that speaks a massive testament to how willing they are to participate in and promote sport culture for strength sports. So
definitely,
massive shout out to them. So the next question is, how are you managing to juggle being an athlete, a coach with the strength guys, and working as a sales rep for Eleiko? That's a lot of work.
Yeah, I'm the type of person that I'm not happy unless I have 100 things on my plate.
Right.
On top of that, I was also doing the diploma in performance nutrition.
I was about to ask.
Up until about January. I don't know. I just enjoy all of those things, and finding time for all of them in my life is important to me. I've always been someone who craves routine, so I guess I'm lucky in that way, that I don't find it difficult to just follow a routine and get things done. I would say I'm quite a disciplined person, so I don't struggle with that. And again, that's not me tooting my own horn. It's just who I am.
That's okay. You can toot it a little bit.
It's just my personality. I've never struggled with having the discipline to go and do something, but I just love all those things so much. And I'm really lucky to be with someone who supports me in doing all of those things as well, because obviously that's a lot of time in my week taken up, but I'm very grateful that he enjoys being involved in those things as well. But yeah, I just like being busy.
Yeah. But that's what I love. I love that. So you're quite disciplined. You've got a good amount of, you're it seems like you've got things regimented in such a way where you can balance time very well and give your all to each thing. And the reason I want to bring that up is, and the reason I like mentioning that is because a lot of the time when people want to achieve something, like you mentioned, you're constantly upskilling, got your diploma, jumped at the opportunity for a job with Eleiko, you did the internship program with the strength guys, you traveled for White Light Media Championship, you traveled for Irish Open Nationals. A lot of the time people are like, I don't have the time for all these things. And I like dispelling the fact that is an awful lot of bullshit a lot of the time. Like, now, I'm not saying everyone's situation is the same.
Exactly, yeah.
You know, you have mentioned, you know, you've got the advantage of a fantastically supportive partner. It seems like your family are very much on board for everything you're doing and the opportunities you're creating for yourself. As you mentioned, you're now working alongside some phenomenal people who are obviously like, you know, they're trying to, what's the expression? The high tide raises all ships, you know?
Exactly.
So we can all come up together. And so, like we mentioned earlier on, one of the best things about Irish powerlifting as well. And not only have you done all those things and with the help of all the people around you, but still you're putting yourself in these scenarios. You also took the reins on doing the Nationals preview podcast, which phenomenal work. Well done.
Thank you.
Hopefully we'll see more episodes there because can never have too many podcasts, let's be honest. But that was actually something I was trying to arrange that I was going to try to do with Adam, Connor and potentially Raquel here, but trying to get everyone on the same schedule is just impossible. This is one of the things about in-person podcasting is that it can be tough to get people at times that suit them, suit the studio, suit my schedule. So everyone's got, you know, so thank you again for coming on. But you took the reins, and I know Shane and Lawrence of the Strength Syndicate podcast had done it previously, but you took the reins, the On Eire podcast, is that?
Yeah.
Savage stuff. Love the name. So you took the reins on that, and so naturally, I listened to some of it because I wanted to see what the prediction was for me.
Yeah.
But, and I think he's pretty much nailed it. I was going to come through it just because I was so far ahead of the other two lads. And I was like, you know what? They're not wrong. But that was just how it was. And Cian was naturally going to be first in our weight class. Cian Madden, absolute juggernaut of an under 93. Please go up a weight class and give the rest of us a chance, you know? Jesus. I was just delighted Matthew Henry didn't compete now. Another phenomenal Irish under 93 powerlifter. But with that then in mind, so I want to look just a little bit, we don't spend a lot of time on the podcast, but with the predictions, was there any predictions that were made that you were then like completely surprised by what happened on the day that you can recall? Because I know it was quite a long podcast.
I think the 105s was just so hard to call for. Mm-hmm. And I was giving out my like top 3 for it, and I was like, I can find a reason why all 3 of these people, and even people outside that top 3, could win. So I had a funny feeling that I could end up being wrong on that one. Ken absolutely blew it out of the water. He lifted on day 1, and I was like, your last deadlift is the best lift of the weekend, without a doubt. Like, there was phenomenal lifting on day 2, but no one was going to top what he came back and did. But I really enjoyed doing that prediction podcast because, look, some people don't like them. Some people, you know, they love it, they hate it. I think they're good to drum up some hype around the event.
Absolutely agree. Yeah.
And like talk about how incredible our lifters in Ireland are and get excitement around that and talk about people who are up and coming. So I really wanted to do it. I've always listened to them. So I was really excited to get to host it and put it out there. Other than that, I think the rest of the predictions were pretty similar. There was a bit of a shake-up in the 74s. But unfortunately, that was at the expense of someone bombing out, which you absolutely never, ever want to see. But yeah, it was just an absolutely incredible weekend.
Absolutely. Do you know what you mentioned there about what happens with the under 74s? We really don't know what happens until the day.
No.
We really don't know who's going to have the podium finish. Like, I had actually assumed for the under 105s, we had 3 main contenders for anyone listening. There was Dami from Abs, Melvin from City Gym, and Ken from Odyssey Strength / Phenom, I guess.
Yeah.
You know, and it was, I think it literally was 1 kilo between them all.
It was, yeah.
Which was, that is, like we were in the same flight. We were flight D, the under 93s, which like, the crowd gave us loads, which was really nice, but everyone was there for the under 105. So we were like just warming up the bar for them. It was pretty much like, them and Keane lifting the heaviest, and the rest of us were just there. And not to undersell Beck Phillips. No, is Beck Phillips his last name?
Yeah.
I knew he was Beltless Beck for a long time. He's a great. I hadn't really heard of him until last year, and then he podiumed at Nationals last year, and then he had a great day out there as well. But the under 105s, even in the back, was like, fucking hell. Yeah. These lads are nuts.
Yeah.
Ken was loafing his handler. Dami ran outside and got sick at one stage.
Yeah. I was in that session too.
That's right, yeah.
Me and the girls were like, you can feel the testosterone in this room.
It was bananas, yeah. That's right. You guys, you were in with Megan Fitzpatrick from Abs.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to remember who else was on the podium.
So you had Jordan Bright.
Jordan Bright, yeah. Wow.
Incredible lifter coming up. Her squat was 10 kilos under the junior squat world record. How amazing is that we're having these lifters in Ireland?
Outstanding.
Like, I think people don't expect it of Ireland, but we're coming up.
There's something in the water.
There's something in the water, as all these other podcasts say, and they're like, this person has shooters. Ireland's got shooters. Ireland has people coming up. Jordan's squat was absolutely nuts, and she broke a record that has been standing by Brona McPeak for a couple of years now. It's so cool to see lifters breaking like long-standing records. I think as well, Jodie Stevens, we didn't give her enough hype on the podcast because we just expected her to come in and do something great. But then she did. But when you saw it in person, it was absolutely immense. I was commentating on her session and she benched 90 kilos for a new junior bench record. When I was competing in 2021, that bench record was 77.5 kilos.
Yeah.
She's put it up 12.5 kilos since then. Just ridiculous standard of lifting.
Like, I think that can't be like, you can't say that enough, because like 12.5 kilos on a bench press.
Oh my God.
Is massive.
And that record had stood since 2018 or 2017, like a really long time.
Yeah.
I think the standard of female lifting since 2020 has absolutely accelerated. The standard of male lifting has gone up as well, but how quickly it's rising in women in the country is insane.
Well, this is actually something I do like to highlight. Is one of the things I like about powerlifting, and I think it can be said for CrossFit as well, probably more so for CrossFit, I think now, is the visibility of both, like, of male and female athletes is about the same.
Yeah.
Because there's no, like, the performances of each are not changed based on what's happening on the bar. You know what I mean? Like, you've got like very lightweight ladies outlifting essentially like 99% of people in not just the country but the world. Like, you know what I mean? So it's outstanding. Like and I think as the sport grows, we'll get more people in and we'll see these numbers continually pushed.
Yeah.
Because I think what people underestimate is that the sport is still relatively new in Ireland.
Yeah.
You know, like there wasn't even an Irish PF technically in 2014. Do you know what I mean? So the fact that it's like less than 10 years old for the tested fitter, I know there was like some like rogue elements here and there running comps, but like to the standard we're at now, to the people coming through with the likes of Trinity Barbell, DCU, helping to promote newer lifters into the sport, and as I've mentioned, some people that have found their first sport in powerlifting or found a group of people to train alongside. I think that's the real value in the sport. But one of the other things then I wanted to touch off with actually, do you know what? I'll ask now while we were talking about the preview podcast. Would you consider doing a review podcast?
We're setting it up for Friday.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Looking forward to listening to that.
Because I think it deserves it. I think like, I can't stop talking about how incredible the weekend was. It deserves a review. And to go back on, points that were made in the first podcast and talk about them again. It's scheduled in.
Are you having Conor Campbell back on?
We are, yes. Yeah,
great. I want to see what he makes of the memes Hercules has been shooting off with about his predictions for Emma McDermott.
Yeah.
Do you know, like, this is the point though, like, if I think it's all good. It's all banter, like. Yeah. But I think it's a good thing to have those objective conversations about the lifters as athletes. Now, naturally, for some people, it probably is difficult. As you mentioned, some people are like, oh, why are you doing them? Don't do them. We don't like them. I think they're fucking deadly because objectively speaking, we are trying to promote people. You're trying to get people to watch.
Definitely.
Give them some investment about the athlete before they go in. So I think it's fair to say Connor's observations, if Emma had listened before, maybe she went out with something to prove. Well, now Emma's a fierce athlete anyway, let's be honest. She was always going to go out and absolutely smash it.
Yeah.
But I'm glad to see that that he will have to eat his words, and I think he'll absolutely do it. I think he'll be like, I'll hold my hands up. She absolutely smashed it,
Yeah. And I think obviously if you're an athlete, having to listen to things about yourself maybe isn't the most enjoyable experience if someone isn't saying something that you agree with. But we have this in every other sport.
Yep.
And everyone's always talking about how they want powerlifting to grow. We have to be open to people having conversations about athletes' performances. And yeah, if there's any place to prove them wrong, it's on the platform
100%.
a week later. As you said, all the talk can happen, but what happens on the day is what matters in the end. But I do think having those sort of podcasts is good. When you look to other sports and the media around them and how people's performances are analysed and everything like that, that's kind of where we want to go with the sport as well.
Well, I look at it like the Thursday before Nationals, I was in the 3 Arena for the darts. I'm not like mad big fan of the darts, but I had a fucking ball. It was amazing.
Yeah.
And I was looking around, it's like, I can't believe all these people are so invested in these overweight drunk lads throwing darts at a dartboard. But it was just a good time. And I really see that we can make so much more powerlifting with people like I'm doing the Iron Mindset podcast. You've got your podcast now. The Odyssey boys are doing theirs. Shane and Lawrence are back doing their thing. These things are what can help get people to say, you know what, I am going to go down and check that out.
Yeah.
Two of my clients, nothing to do with powerlifting, just people I train, came and watched Nationals and had the best time. One of my guys that was there now was like, I want to do this. So we're going to sign him up to the May Open in
amazing
Belfast.
And I think we need to show the side of the sport that people don't realize. Like, powerlifting is a strategy sport. As much people are like, it's a strength sport. Yes, it is. But not always the strongest person wins. The person who makes the most attempts of the most weight wins, which comes down to strategy. It comes down to your mental approach and sports psychology. And I think if we look at other sports like, Formula One with the Drive to Survive on Netflix, that has massively grown the amount of people watching Formula One because they probably looked at it before and was like, oh, cars going around a racetrack, that's boring. But now they've seen everything else that goes into it and how interesting that is. And that's what's drawn them in. So I think that's why prediction podcasts can be good to draw on those other sides of lifting, because they said not always the strongest person wins. Yes. It is a strength sport, but the person who makes the most successful and highest attempts wins.
100%.
And there's lots of games and psychological things that go into that. My parents came up to watch the weekend and I was trying to explain all of that to them to keep them in the loop, and things like rules, like the bench rule and reffing, and we had a jury. And I think the more we talk about those things, it actually makes the sport even more interesting.
Do you know, actually, that just to move it as much as I really enjoy talking about the Irish PF. I actually wanted to say as well, I think it's something that Jay and Abs Pro did really well last year. They built up the athletes behind the lifting very well going into that event, and I think that got people more bought in.
Yeah.
So that's something I'd love to see more people emulate, is particularly because powerlifters are interesting people and they have to do an awful lot to get to where they are.
Yeah.
So this is why I think providing these types of platforms is really good. But you mentioned something I wanted to make sure I actually asked you about. So later in 2022, the International Powerlifting Federation decided that they were going to change the bench press rule.
Yeah.
This is something I've very briefly talked about with Jake. Mentioned it. He doesn't like it. I know Jay is now not enforcing it at the AB series. So now there's many people that are going to be listening that they might not give a shit about this point. So you can forward about 5 minutes. But this is important for the powerlifters listen. It's important for, particularly, I think the rule, like, I'm going to get what you think of the rule first, but I'm going to talk through people at home. It's basically, it eliminates the ability for lighter weight lifters to get into what would have been called excessive, I'm using air quotes here for those listening, arch positions to limit the range of motion they needed to move the bar from point A to point B and back up again. So from their fully locked out position down to their chest and locked out then with the elbows. There's now a joint angle required between the elbow and the shoulder. Can't remember the exact thing. I don't have the mobility to be someone that can do it, so I'm always going to be grand. But so it has come into effect now since January. And I think it actually did maybe affect one or two of the calls at nationals.
Yeah.
So, firstly, as somebody who has a great bench press and as somebody who utilized this prior, like your mobility and your ability to get into good positions prior to this change, what was your opinion on the rule? And then how has this affected you and your training since the rules come in, and your overall thoughts on what caused the rule and the outcome of the rule? That's a lot to ask, but just everything you think about it.
I think this is it's such a tough topic. I think the rule affects the athletes as much as it affects the viewership of the sport, and it also affects how the sport is judged. And I think that needs to be taken into account of how effective the rule change is how it affects everybody. Because I know as a referee, there's a lot going through your mind now of what you have to ref. From my point of view, if the sport sets a standard and I have to change what I'm doing to meet that, I will do it.
You'll adapt.
It wasn't fun to have to do it. I'm not going to lie. Bench press was my favorite lift, and it just seemed to be on this exponential trajectory for me. I benched 45 kilos in 2019 and I benched 85 in the summer of 2022.
Wow.
Like, I'd added 40 kilos in like 3 years. You know, that was just absolutely exponential growth. I loved doing it. I loved the technicality for it. And yeah, it was a massive change. It was hard to have a lift that you enjoy so much be one that causes you, so much annoyance all of a sudden, and trial and error. But I was lucky that I wasn't doing any competitions the end of last year. So as soon as the rule came out, I was like, I'm just going to try get myself to the standard that it needs to be at. I can't say yet whether I think the rule is good or bad, because we can't see until there's international competitions where it's internationally reffed how many people it's going to affect. I think it's been difficult because there was a lot of confusion around interpretation of the rule. Luckily, the IPF did clarify that. But it's going to be interesting to see how many people it affects. I know there's pros and cons to the rule. We do talk about how, in squat, we do have a minimum range of motion that we have to meet. You can't make a shorter range of motion to lift more weight in the squat. So I can understand what they mean about the same principle being applied to bench press. I do think it does probably affect a lot more females than it does males.
True.
But Megan Scanlon, do you know Megan Scanlon? She's 63 kg lifter from the States. She had a 143 bench press before the rule change. And she put up a post to say, and I think it summarized it well, she goes, the big bench pressers will still be at the end of the flight. They'll still be strong. And I do believe that. I just think once we have a competition where we can see how it's reffed at an international standard, there's going to be a lot more clarification for people. It's still very new. I mean, we've had only one comp with it, 2 comps with it here in Ireland. And I said we've had no international competitions with it yet. We're just gonna have to wait and see how it goes. It was a challenge, but as I've said before, I'm no stranger to, if I have to work my butt off to increase something, I'm gonna do it. And this weekend I managed to match my best bench in competition from before the rule change with it.
Great.
So I'm pretty happy with that. I do think the fact that we had a jury at the weekend was good for the bench rule, because now you have 6 sets of qualified eyes looking at your lift. Some people are for juries, some people are against them. I think it's a good thing. I think it was run fantastically at the weekend. I think it's people don't realize how hard it is to be a referee until you put yourself in that situation. And I think it was managed incredibly well. And I don't think anybody bombed out on bench depth. So, which is good to see.
Well, firstly, with the referees, you're absolutely right. Like, at the end of the day, these people are here volunteering. Yeah. They're giving up their weekend. And I think it's one of the, again, emotions ride high. They say it in every athlete brief, but you have to respect
100%.
Like, there's no need to get upset about these things. Like, we've all had it, and we've all had calls that probably didn't go our way. But this is what I say to everybody whenever they get annoyed at a call. It's like, well, you've accepted all the white lights they've given you.
Yes.
So you have to accept the red lights. And to not is to call the entire decision-making process into question, which completely undermines the sport.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that most people understood what the story was. And even with the jury, I'm sure we will see iterations on how this can be used effectively. But I do agree. I think it is a net positive for the sport, because you've got people who aren't actively always have to be switched on exactly to what's going on the platform. As all the referees is, they can review footage very quickly. They can, which big up to Mark Stell for providing the KiloCast live stream. That was his joke. He's like, well, if they red light me on anything, well, there goes the live stream. It was, I was saying the same. It was actually my squat rack we were using. I was like, well, if I get red lighted out now, the fucking competition's over. I'm taking the rack. But no, like, I do. And that's the thing. The more refined we can make the sport, the fairer the calls we can make. And the more human error we can remove, the better. Yeah. Especially with rule changes that are still new, like the bench rule. Like, again, the reason I ask is because I agree. I think it affects more female lifters than male lifters. I think it specifically affects the lighter weight female lifters a lot more so. And personally, I admire the mindset, because I know you're somebody you've used, as I said, great leverages to produce great bench presses. And this has naturally been a big change to your training. So to take it on the chin and say, well, you know what, it's frustrating, but I have to work around it. It's great. It's a great attitude to have. But I would say, I think I personally, I don't know the IPF president. I haven't seen the exact reasons behind it. It's all third-hand information. Yeah. But if the motivations are what they have claimed to be, that it was like online comments made about the bench presses, I think it's a very poor reasoning to impact the athletes, particularly in a sport that is still growing in the public eye. And, people will learn as time goes on. There's a reason why we do things the way we do them. I don't think we should ever do anything that punishes the athlete for the sake of public appearances, especially when the athletes at international meets, they do an awful lot to be the people to get to that position. Yeah. And we'll see how it plays out. Personally, I'm net neutral to negative on it. I don't think it was a good decision, and I'd prefer at the end of 2024 they realize, or as we get to 2024 they realize what a headache it is. They go, you know what, let's just overturn that.
Yeah, I kind of felt that immediately at the start, was like, well, why are we listening to people who don't even watch our sport or will never do our sport? And then I understand on the other point of view that, well, we want more people to watch our sport, and we want people from outside of our sport to tune in. It's very complex and it's very nuanced, but I think the thing that I care about the most is, can it actually be refed effectively and integrate into competitions smoothly? At the end of the day, that's what we want, is that the rule can just, if there's a new rule, it just fits in seamlessly to how competitions are run. So I think at the end of the day, that's probably the most important thing to assess about whether it's working or not.
I think it's the most proactive way to look at it as well. Yeah. It's let's just let it evolve out over the course of the year and see what happens. Yeah. I'll be honest, I obviously don't think it's a tenable argument, but I would only be concerned in the sense that if we're going to start letting people outside the sport dictate what happens inside the sport, look how common the expression sumo is cheating is. Yeah. And realistically, people make comments online that don't really mean anything. It's something I've talked to Raquel about. I talked to Kim a little bit about. I'm sure you've seen it yourself as a female powerlifter, as a girl notable online, especially in a strength sport. I'm sure you're no stranger to people letting you know their opinions on the internet.
Especially on bench press.
Yeah, I'd assume it's mostly private account or young lads or I don't like, it's actually something Kim and I were trying to get to the bottom of. I don't know what motivates it.
I don't know what motivates it either. It is good that there's so many strong females online, just putting out the message that women are strong. And I think, people talk about certain techniques like, sumo or bench arching or whatever it is, and they go, this is a strength sport. And I do agree, but what I've talked about before is it's not just a strength sport. There's so much more else that goes into that, and we have to look at the sport from all of those angles.
I think unironically, I think on the whole sumo thing, the sumo's cheating thing, I think if most of the people that gave out about it could pull more sumo, they would.
Yeah.
Like I hold my hands up and say it. Like, I've tried it and I'm fucking terrible at it. So I'll just stick to conventional. I can be a bit like, I think conventional favors more so people who are just a bit, they just want to like be a bit more retarded and less clinical. That's like what's the word? The unarticulate way of putting it.
I actually used to lift sumo.
Yeah, I assumed you did.
All of my competitions until the last two.
And you swapped?
Yeah, and I went 3 for 3 on deadlift. I'd never done that before.
I'd see you made a post about that actually recently. Just seeing, yeah. So you're back. You've swiped back to conventional. You're using conventional now.
Yeah.
Because one of your earliest videos I'd seen is you setting up in Trinity Barbell for the sumo when you were much smaller.
Yeah.
I think you had like a comparison slide.
Yeah.
Those are great things to have. It's one of the best things about like social media and Instagram and things like that is the ability to document your progress.
And look back at how far you've come. You talked about it earlier that sometimes in this sport we get so caught up on the next thing or what the top lifters are doing that we don't stop to smell the roses and really appreciate how far you've come, how much progress you might have made, even if you're not where you want to be. Like, just the fact that you've made so much progress shows that you can get there in the future,
Absolutely, yeah. So with that then, have you now taken that moment to stop, smell the roses, reflect and go, I've got my 400 dots, I've embraced my weight gain, I'm fitting comfortably and strong into this weight class and the best is still yet to come?
Definitely, 100%. And I think we talked about as well, I was so caught up in 400 dots for ages. Nationals last year, I thought I was going to get it. And I didn't think about it once this weekend until I'd done it. And I think removing myself from the pressure of that number and just being like, just hit your lifts and see where you fall was a pretty healthy thing. But I feel like I've probably matured a lot in my mindset towards lifting over the last year. Yeah,
well, I mean, you've essentially grown up in the sport now over the last little while. What is next for Jayne Jones?
What's next for me? I think I'm probably going to take a break from competing for a couple of months or so. As you mentioned, I started with a new coach. We only started in January and I've already done 2 competitions. So I want some time to put in a proper build and see where that can take me. When I say taking time off competition, I'm not taking time off training. I love training. I'm back in the gym tomorrow. I hate after competition when people are like, take a week off. I'm like, nah. I love being in the gym. It gives me structure to my day. So yeah, focusing on building towards that. And I would say mainly just focusing on building towards the next nationals in 2024, which isn't until October. So we've got 18 months for it, which is nice. So that's going to be my main focus, is just building towards that. And then, as I mentioned, I'm nutrition coaching with the strength guys now, and I'm also starting doing powerlifting coaching. So I have my first co-coaching client with Jason. He's taken me on. He's kind of, a mentor for me going into this, which I'm really grateful for, and I'm really excited to learn more and help someone along their journey in the same way so many other people have helped me.
Amazing. Like, it sounds like you've a massive 2023 ahead of you. As you mentioned, you're already planning to build into 2024 nationals. So who knows, by the time I speak to you again, you could be, now you're coaching powerlifters. Who knows who we're going to have you mention, All right, Jayne, it's been real having you on the Iron Mindset. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.